Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's May 16th. One of the few times where I'm getting the date right. If anybody goes through like the 5 years of these that we've been doing, you'll see I get the date wrong more often than I get it right. But anyway, May 16th. Welcome to TRU. Those of you who stumble upon us randomly or and intentionally, but you don't know us. I want you to know a little bit about who we are. Theater Resources Unlimited is the company I created 33 years ago, and I had the odd idea that it would be nice to help producers create theater because without producers, none of us, like I'm a writer, by the way, none of us would ever see our shows up on stage. So we've been doing this arts services organization that's about the business of theater mostly. We now we've expanded our program so that we don't just focus on producers. We do plenty of stuff for artists, and a lot of it is focused on helping artists understand the business. So we focus on the art, but we want to make sure you understand the business. It's very important. Writers, one thing that you should know is that all producers, I've heard this from like dozens of producers, they would much rather work with somebody, with a writer who actually understands the business. So think about that. So we started doing this as a community service. It's still really, it really is sort of a community service. But we started it April 17th, 2020. Guess why? Yeah, a shutdown. And I have to admit that I went kicking and screaming into the world of virtual because I didn't really want to know what Zoom was. I didn't really want to know anything about virtual. But I finally succumbed to the charms of Zoom, and I did these Friday meetings just so people could have a place to go on at least once a week and be with the community. And it turned out to be way more important than I ever conceived of. People really became dependent on these weekly gatherings. And not only that, but TRU, Theater Resources Unlimited, a small arts organization in New York, suddenly is serving people from all over the world, literally around the world. Um, Oddly enough, we have a big following in Australia. I don't know why, but I'm happy to have them in UK and Germany and Malaysia and all over the United States. We have people on both coasts. In the average weekly community gathering that we do, we normally have more people from outside of New York than we have who are involved in actually in New York. And it's the one thing I can thank COVID for. It's like, thank you, COVID. This has really made a big difference for us as an organization. So we're going to talk. We talk about all aspects of theater, and one area that I haven't really touched on in a while, and I really respect and admire it, is Theater for Young Audiences, TYA for those of you who are hip. So the TYA people know what I'm talking about when I say TYA. Theater for young audiences is a whole other aspect of theater that is not only crucial for the development of audiences, and I would say is really crucial for the development of young audiences because young audiences become the commercial audiences someday. Um, it also it's just also I think is so important for artists to understand that there are very different areas where you can actually be creative and create your art. So this is an option that I'd like to talk about today with my guest, Barbara Pasternack, who is, well, I have to say, Theater for Young, TheaterWorks USA is probably the best known. I hesitate to say that, but I know in my world it's the best known company that is dedicated to the development of theater for young audiences. So I'm very honored and happy to have Barbara with me here today. So let me bring her on, and I want you to meet her. Barbara, I'm going to bring you on and tell us a little bit about your background prior to uh, TheaterWorks. Yes.
No, it's funny because I don't really keep track of time, but somebody on my staff told me this is my 40th year. with TheaterWorks USA, which really freaked me out a little bit. Because I was a child when I started. But before that, I had a degree in theater and education, but I bounced in and out of the arts because I needed to make a living like so many people. And so I took random jobs where you could actually use your skill set, that you get in theater, which has to do with producing and organizing and writing. And so I worked for Harper and Row doing events, and I worked for the Wall Street Journal, and I actually got a page one byline. And at every job, people would say to me, "Do you want to progress here?" And I would say, "No, I still want to work in the theater." And so I remember when TheaterWorks USA put out an ad for an assistant to the artistic director, which was Jay Harnick, and everybody in New York applied. I mean, and nobody got the job, including me the first time. And then it appeared again in the search, whatever that search was back then. And I applied again. And I think I got hired because I was a generalist. It's not like I walked in and I said, I want to be a director or I want to be a playwright or, I was non-threatening. I was a young woman and I had a lot of different skills. So I think that's why I got the job. And when I walked in, I don't remember how old the company was, to be honest, but we'll be 60 years old officially in 2027. We'll be celebrating our anniversary. But Jay had been around forever, and the company did a lot of historicals. And when I came in, Jay was already not a young man, and Charlie Hull wanted to grow the company. Our offices were in a synagogue, and I came in, and I was not a history buff, really. I was a literature buff. I mean, now everything seems to get turned into literature, movies. They all get turned into musicals. But when I came to TheaterWorks, that wasn't the case. And I remember also they didn't do shows for younger kids because of the historical nature. It was very educational. The first show was Young Abe Lincoln on Broadway, and that's how theater works, which was called Part Performing Arts Repertory Theater began. And so Jay produced this show. It didn't have a long run, and then he got the idea to tour it to schools. And then Charlie Hull came on, and then Fran and Barry were sort of in that world.
That would be the Weislers, everyone.
Yeah, the Weislers were definitely in that TYA world, but it was all very local. It was in New York. It was like the surrounding areas. And then it started to grow, but it wasn't what it is now. And so the first thing I did is I was very interested in Harold and the Purple Crayon. And without telling anybody, really, at TheaterWorks, I went about trying to get the rights to Harold and the Purple Crayon. And I didn't actually tell anyone at TheaterWorks, Jay or Charlie, until I needed money until I actually had to pay for the rights. And then we went out, we did a presentation. It was a long time ago. It was Crockett Johnson's widow. We went to Connecticut and we got the rights to Harold and the Purple Crayon. And I think that was the first real adaptation of a popular piece of children's literature that TheaterWorks did. At the time, Ken Arthur was the managing director. And I think the two of us both had this vision for how to grow the company with these popular titles.
I forgot how many people I knew from there. Ken,
Oh
oh
my
my God.
God.
I want to do a brief shout out for Jay Harnick. I have to say, well, for those of you who don't know who he is, I'm right about this. He was Sheldon's brother.
Sheldon's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Barbara Barry's husband.
Barbara Barry's husband. This I didn't know. Oh my
Oh,
God.
oh yeah. And he worked like he knew Sondheim, Hal Prince. Like honestly, some of the lunches that we would sit around, it was just like theater royalty. Ossie
Okay, but
Davis, I
but I
met.
got but I want to say about Jay, he was very humble. He was a very gentle, sweet man. He was very supportive in the early days of TRU. He was there for me many, many times.
He was a gentleman and a scholar and was very beloved. What he wasn't when I came in is like he was not as aggressive as I was with developing new work, And I think Charlie Hull had this feeling that the company needed to grow. And that's why he brought in this 20-something year old person who just had to work around. I don't know. I like to joke. I learned how to be duplicitous, but not really. But I definitely learned how to be a producer by doing that. And Jay was always super supportive, and he was a great dramaturg. And honestly, he had an office in town hall, and the meetings that we would have there with like the scripts falling off the shelves with, because early career, I got to work with Michael Mayer and Aarons and Flaherty and like all of those people. We all grew up together. And that was sort of like the beginning of my introduction to that kind of theater was with Jay, was who he knew and who he let me bring in. Helen Merrill. Like I met Helen Merrill and Helen Merrill would give me her clients. She was a really, for those of you who don't know, she was a very famous, gruff speaking literary agent. And so I would go to her to find out her clients. And like when John Bozzetti was a baby agent, I like to say, when he was just coming up, he would send me Bobby Lopez and Jeff Marks and, Pasek and Paul. And so, all of those relationships I feel like came because TheaterWorks was always, people looked at us and said, this is a quality organization that creates new work for young and family audiences, but we would always treat it like it was, we were developing a musical. We were just developing a musical
So
and the best.
let me ask you something because I just want I was going to ask about all of this, and you've answered it before I've asked even, but the changes that you were doing, were they when you were an assistant or before you moved
Oh
up
no,
into
I
the
was an assistant and then I moved up to associate and then I came on and then I was artistic director. But no, I was an assistant too. But Charlie would say, "Hey, go out there and hustle." And I was like going out there and hustling and I learned how to hustle. And again, I remember I came from the Wall Street Journal where I was interviewing people. So I had to hunt people down, connect with them, and get them to do something for me. And before that, even at college, I was writing and producing musicals and doing them at like, up in the Catskills at somebody's theater for the Bungalow Colony group. Like
so
I think I was always a producer.
this flips the conversation that I was going to have because you were already making your imprint on the company before you even took over as the executive director
Yes, and now
or artistic
I was
director,
the artistic. Now I'm
artistic
actually
director,
the producing artistic
artistic,
director
artistic.
because
Yeah.
our executive director just left. But yeah, I feel like Ken Arthur and I really we changed the company in a big way, and thank God we did because I feel like these big titles now if you look at Broadway and you look at what people are developing, they're all going after big titles, big movies, big brands and jukebox things because TheaterWorks USA traditionally has been, and when you say people should know about the business, I agree with you. Because when I meet with writers, the first thing I tell them is how our business works. And I say, we are only like 15% unearned revenue, contributed revenue, which means that the rest of it has to be earned, right? Which means I can't just do your title just because it's a good show. I can't just do it because I love it. I have to be able to sell it and sell it on the road. And so a lot of the decision has to do with, not having 40% or 60% unearned revenue, where I can be like a regional theater, right? And you mix up the Mamma Mia's with the original thing. If no one will buy my original thing and I don't have a theater with a subscription audience, I can't get it out there, no matter how much I like it. So it defines the art, and I feel like this is something else that we constantly fight to change, which is to increase how much money we are able to raise and not earn, how many grants we're able to get, and yet, people look at us and say, well, you're such a rich organization, but we're not. And also, we're all about access, right? We're access for families, for young people. So, a lot of these tickets are not very expensive. And also, you can only sell a show for so much to a presenter. for a family series. So it's an interesting business model. And this whole touring thing, a lot of TYA companies that toured have stopped touring and have gone out of business. So, the fact that we're so nimble and that we've been able to sort of instinctively roll with the punches. And also, our work is so valued that we can get a title like a Dog Man and get somebody like Dave Pilkey, who wrote Captain Underpants and Dog Man, and to say, I love what you did, and get a title that will really sell, which actually helps you survive.
So let me ask you this. Do you pursue, this is one part of your business. We're going to talk about other parts of your business as
Yeah.
well. First thing I want to clarify is you don't just do musicals.
No, but I would say we do 80 to 90% musicals.
Okay, so but there are not, because I know Cheryl Davis is my co-founder of TRU, so I know
Yeah.
that she's done work for you. Um, and so I guess what I wanted to ask on behalf of the people in the room,
Yeah.
um, you make it sound like you only do big titles, known works. Is there room for people with new works? Um, what would interest you in a show by an by an unknown writer with an unknown title? Um, what would they want to be able to show you that would give you some confidence and they want your ability to sell it?
I would say an unknown title and an unknown writer, I could not produce. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I'm being very transparent. Sometimes what I would say to that writer is go to another theater that can. Like, go to a theater that you look at what their roster shows. They are a theater. They have a subscription audience. They can book our Dog Man in to sell tickets, and then they can do an unknown title. Like that's what you should do. TheaterWorks can't because we tour. Remember, somebody has to actually buy the show off of a brochure, or a presenter has to buy the show to put in their weekend series, and they want to sell tickets. And so if they don't think they can sell tickets, right? And or if we can't sell tickets, then we can't give it a life. We do not have bricks and mortar. We do not have a theater. Minneapolis Children's Theater or some of those other theaters that Christopher mentioned, they can mix it up. And in fact, post-pandemic, what we're seeing is somebody like Seattle Children's Theater that never used to book us in, they booked in Dog Man so that they could then program their season with other non-titles. They booked in Cat Kid, and then I was there for that. And they asked the question, how many people have never been in our theater before? And a lot of hands were raised. So Cat Kid got the people in the door because it's a title, and then they could sell the rest of their series. So I feel like that's who we try. And again, there have been years where we've gotten more grants. But the shows that like we did Cheryl's show a long time ago, and that was Color of Justice.
Right.
We probably could not sell that now. People are not so into historicals now, period. And also, it's interesting, the younger titles. And again, I'm talking about not a general audience show. I'm talking about shows that tour for schools. It's easier because there's no testing, right? They can get kids out of the classroom when they're younger. They don't have to worry about that. If you have a kid who's in like middle school or high school and you have a tour coming through of like, I don't know, Mamma Mia, 6, and they can only go on one field trip, maybe they're going to go to that Broadway thing. Or maybe they have a relationship with like, Chicago Shakes, right? And Chicago Shakes is going to do, and I'm just making this up, they're going to do, um, I don't know, Romeo and Juliet. And so they're going to do the evening performances and they're going to do the student matinees. And so maybe that's where they're going to go. So again, I'm talking just about TheaterWorks USA and why we are forced to do thing. You could be the best writer in the world. It could be the best play in the world. If I can't afford to tour it, now remember, I'm also an equity company, so we're paying equity salaries. I'm SDC, and all of those costs are higher, right? Because non-union is much cheaper, but we're not a non-union company. So I would say the average amount that it costs to run a tour that's maybe 9 weeks can be over $300,000 for one tour.
Well, let me switch this out for a second. Let's talk about the process itself. Let's talk about what theater for a young audience is. I know what I wanted to ask you. You do all of the groundwork for getting the known titles.
Yes,
You negotiate all. Have any writers ever actually on their own gotten the rights to a well-known title and brought it to you?
never. Not
So
that they couldn't, not that I
yeah,
wouldn't accept, not that I
yeah.
wouldn't say, great, come on in, but that has never happened. Never. In
So
all,
there's one door that's possible for those of you in the room who are writers. I mean, if you want to be very aggressive about it, find some sort of young author piece that you think could be adapted and pursue it. I will warn you, if you don't already know, it's very difficult to get rights to these properties.
it's
But
difficult for me, so it's got to be difficult for everybody.
but I do know people that have done it. So the
Agreed.
other thing I wanted to look at is it's very easy to assume that writing for theater for a young audience is different than writing for commercial Broadway, but I'm not sure that that's really the case. I think there are assumptions that people must make about simplifying the writing, but I think the things that go into good theater still go into good TYA.
It is. It's like just, I always tell writers with a first draft, don't anticipate, write, just write the show for you. I mean, there's certain things you can't do. You can't put sex in, you can't curse, right? But usually the books you're adapting don't have that anyway. I remember I was working with Bathsheba Doran, who now writes a lot for television, and she did a play. She did an adaptation of Great Expectations that Kathy Chalfant starred in. And the first draft she gave me was horrible. It was like it was what she imagined a TYA version of Great Expectations should be. And I said, "Why did you write this? This is not like any of it." She said, "Well, this is what kids would like." And I said, "I don't really care what kids would like. Write this, throw this out and start again and write your draft." And then it was a play, and then it's like, I think you can't anticipate also what your audience is going to like, but you do have to be true to the underlying material. Like if you're adapting, that's very important. And when I say true, I don't mean slavishly true, and that's probably not a PC word anymore, but you know what I mean. Is like you have to understand what the reader loves about the property and what the underlying author meant when they wrote it. You have to understand both of those things in order to do a good adaptation. And then from there, you can fly. So, for instance, we adapted Sarah Plain and Tall. That was Larry O'Keefe, Nell Benjamin,
Remember that?
Jordan, which God help us, it was a big show. It went to
You
Dallas Center
you even
Center.
played at the Lortel Theater, didn't you?
It played at the Lord Help, but then it actually got expanded. So, but anyway, that book is like, I don't know, 50 pages long. It's nothing. But and Larry and Nell and Julia changed it a lot. But when the author, Patricia McLaughlin, came to see it, she said, that's exactly what I wrote. And I think that's the most important thing with a TYA show or with any show where you're adapting some well-known material. And then there's other things like Will Aronson, my darling Will Aronson, who, thank you, has maybe happy ending now. He adapted Pete the Cat, and Pete the Cat is nothing. Pete the Cat is like blue shoes, red shoes, white shoes. And, often I have to come up with a concept because I have to pitch to get the rights. So my concept for that was that James Dean, who wrote the Pete the Cat books, he stopped being an artist. He went into business. And one day he saw his cat and he started to paint. And he rediscovered the joy of being artistic. And he stopped being afraid of getting it wrong. And I said, I think that's what Pete the Cat could be. And it has a 1960s groovy feel because there's a VW bus. And Will Aronson said to me, I have no idea what that means, a 1960s. So I made him a mixtape. But again, when they wrote the first, when he and Sarah wrote the first draft, it was not dumbed down for K two, three audiences. It was a really good musical. And then we put it in front of audiences for previews to find out what did they like, what didn't they like, what because they tell you, because they're not like adults. They don't write reviews, they show you with their bodies and they go to the bathroom a lot. So then you craft it, then you have to diagnose, right? And figure out, are they ahead of me? Are they behind me? Is something not clear? Do I need to just take out a word?
In
And
other words, the same things that you have to be aware of writing a play, you have to be aware of writing theater. And you named the baby, you said dumbing it down. That was the thing I was trying to avoid saying. But I think that people think when they're writing for TYA, they have to dumb it down. They have to simplify it, but that doesn't necessarily mean dumbing it down.
no, you don't, you shouldn't dumb it down. And again, that's what when people ask me, when they want to show me samples of their material and they say, "Oh, do you want to see my TYA piece?" I say, "I'll see whatever, but show me your best piece. Show me the piece you're proudest of." And honestly, I respond really well to things that don't sound generic. And I also believe not everybody can write everything. You have to find, it's like a matchmaking thing. You have to find the person who is the right person to adapt the material. So it's not just an assignment. It comes from their soul. There's something they connect with, and then it becomes good. And again, remember, I've worked with people like Bobby Lopez and Jeff Marks, who did several pieces for me. And the first time they walked in, they said to me, "You're going to love us. We never have to rewrite. We always do it right the first time." And then they
I
learn.
just want to say, in case anybody that doesn't know, um, Avenue Q is one of the only shows, possibly the only show that ever started with the songs, and they and had a book built around the songs.
And that's where I met them. I went to a BMI thing. I heard the songs. I reached out to them, and that's what they told me. And then later, Bobby did say at one award thing, "You all should be grateful to TheaterWorks USA because they showed us we do have to rewrite." And I was like, "Well, I didn't even have to show you. I just put your show in front of an audience, and a whole bunch of them got up and went to the bathroom." So the audience showed you. And again, that I think is what is useful about writing TYA is that thing that grown-ups don't always tell you. You can watch an audience of kids and you can learn to craft your work as long as you don't bring your ego into the room first and blame them, right? If you come in and you use them to craft your piece, you learn a lot about crafting a musical.
I think we should, excuse me. I think we should also address the difference between TYA and children's theater. Can we talk about that for a little bit?
I mean, I don't really, I guess children's theater to me feels like an old-fashioned term.
Well, no, I think it's basically what I wanted to get across is the fact that these are shows that are performed by
Oh,
actors.
I see what you're saying. Now,
And,
these are adult actors, not children in theater. Like we don't do what Tada does, which is theater with children.
right.
We do theater with professional adult actors.
I had toyed with the idea of having you on with Tadat to talk about that, but I, I I didn't know whether Nina would be available or not. So
And maybe that's different. I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, though, kids are now performing things like Heathers. So, yeah, there's stuff that's just created for them that speaks to them and has their voices, I guess. But I don't know. You license something and then children are doing it. Like Lightning Thief now is done by kids of all ages all over. And is it a different show? No. Is it a different experience for them if they're three? Maybe. I don't know. In the third grade, I don't know. I don't know that much about children's theater. To be honest, I've never really done children's theater. I've always done this kind of TYA.
well,
Um,
I just want to make sure everybody was clear about TYA is performed by adult performers usually. I
yes,
think
and
that there are
also
probably exceptions.
people are now starting to call it multi-generational theater. That's like the new term, even though I mean, a lot of people still say TYA, but this idea that you present a show that's for everyone and everyone gets it on a certain level. And, and some of it, like, again, I love when grown-ups start to cry. I love when grown-ups come in and they are like, oh God, I'm going to the dentist with my kid, going to see a TYA, and you see them being more and more interested and involved, and they put their phones away. And then afterwards, you realize, wow, they just had a great theatrical experience. And that's terrific, one that they could share with their kids. And I like that's TYA or whatever we call it at its best, is when everybody gets something out of it. And who knows, maybe someday grown-ups won't be so surprised that they took their child to a TYA show and they had a great experience.
Do people actually target different age groups for
Yeah.
when they're doing? So let's talk about the different age groups and what might be different
I
from.
mean, like it's based on, for us, it's based on the title. Like, for instance, Up Pete the Cat is kindergarten through like third grade. Because that's primarily who you're going to get. You're going to get the young kids with their teachers and you're going to get the families. Something like Lightning Thief, which eventually ended up being for older kids, was read in curriculum in fourth grade, so fourth through middle school. Something like Warriors Don't Cry that we did. Which was not a musical. That one was really for high school kids, you know. So yes, I think the material define the audience and the material sort of connected. And then there's the anomaly of Dogman, where Dogman plays. So with Dogman, we actually stepped out of our box. And it's a full-length show. It's a two-act show. It tours now like a regular tour. We advance it. We have some tech, you know. So what people, if you don't know TheaterWorks USA, most of the shows the actors sign as ASMs, which means that they drive the van, they carry the scenery. It's very Shakespearean, right? Old school Shakespeare.
Theater in
You
a box,
set up, you move to the next place.
theater in a trunk.
Theater, except it is not a trunk because it's definitely a set. But with Dogman, what happened is we did it at New World Stages, and we really did very, very well with a general audience. And we realized that maybe this show, which pulls so well on the weekends, could follow a little bit of a different path. And that's what we've been doing with it. And so it gets more general audience than it does school time audiences at this point, which is that is very different, because something like I don't know, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, which we just licensed the script, that's gonna play weekends, but it's also going to play a lot of student, like in school performances in libraries, where Dogman is not made now to go into a school or a library. Kids come to it in a theater space. So
Are the shows that you think are going to succeed, are they different now than they were like 10 years ago? What's changed?
I mean, we used to be able to actually like adapt a fairy tale a long time ago. So I remember Mindy Dickstein and Dan Massey did a Little Red Riding Hood with Ted Pappas directing. That was great. We did Rapunzel with the writers of Friends. We could never do that now. Like if it's something that's so accessible that anybody could develop it, we can't produce it. So I feel like there was a little more freedom back then to just not always have to go after paying for the rights for a popular book. I feel like that's different. And for the younger kids, I feel like maybe their attention span has gotten a little bit shorter, so that like a 50-minute show is really the sweet spot for the very young kids, where I feel like they used to be able to sit for an hour. And now, I mean, and post-pandemic, we had to like teach the audience how to be an audience again. I think that's another thing, is gathering in groups, learning how to be an audience, learning how to focus and listen. Um, it's different, and actors are different, I would say. That's the other thing. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like they're just different. I talked to a Chuck Cooper, and Chuck Cooper will tell stories about touring for TheaterWorks. Chuck and Eddie both got their equity
Chuck?
cards.
Chuck Cooper? Really?
Chuck Cooper tells, and he was just on my board. He just rolled off because he was like, I'm
He's
tired.
retired.
He's retired, but he toured in F. Murray Abraham, and the stories they tell about, going to communities, especially Chuck, who'd never seen people of color, like that was a big deal. Working through things. If you felt sick, you still worked, you showed up, like the work ethic. He talks about all this stuff. And I feel like the world is a different world post-pandemic. Um, and we recognize that. I mean, we've even, believe it or not, we brought in somebody from NYU, their drama therapy program. We realized when actors were coming back from the pandemic that there was a fragility. And so we now have this person that we have engaged to, she talks to actors before they go on the road. She talks to them at the beginning of the rehearsal. She talks to them at the end. And then she's accessible every month for check-ins because they're different. The world is different. And also sometimes the material they're performing goes a little bit deeper and touches things in them that it feels very, very personal. So I'm very proud of our connection with the with that NYU, um, drama therapy thing because I feel like our relationship with actors has gotten even better. Now we're very, I don't know, we're really focused on how people are on the road, how they function. Um, I don't know. Maybe that's sort of a sidebar and isn't really relevant to writers, but
No, no, we have more than writers. It's not
yeah.
just writers, but it's just that I know that there were certain writer concerns I wanted to address. I we you know that we did this how to write a musical that works workshop. It's three parts. Basically, it's the drama. We're looking at the dramaturgical structure that usually provides a strong foundation for a music for a show, any show, and um, we I'm thinking that people probably think they can drop some of the rules when they're writing for young audiences. But I just want to say that I do believe that the dramaturgical um, structure that holds together any musical is probably not going to be a bad idea, and probably it's an essential idea when you're writing for theater for young audiences as
Oh, it
well.
is because conflict, like they have to understand what the conflict is. They have to understand who the protagonist is. They have to root for them.
Yeah.
Um, they have to invest in the story because more than even adults, maybe, they absolutely need to understand what's at stake. And I have to say, I used to like Jay would have certain rules and I would have certain rules and I still like if you have a ballad, it's probably not going to work for a young audience unless there's something dramatic going on, just because they are not patient and and that kind of self-reflection thing is not really for them. However, you can figure out how to do that sort of thing in another way. So and you never know. Sometimes something surprises me also. I'm thinking, wow, that I don't think that's going to work. And then you put it up in front of a group of kids and you can hear a pin drop because they have to be invested. And that moment of release, where they get what they want, like in Cheryl's play, where the young girl had to there was a bit of black doll and a white doll, and she said, I don't like the black doll. It looks dirty. It looks like me. And she chose the white doll. At the end of the show, she chooses the black doll, and the whole audience started to applaud. And it's like it's that release, it's that moment of, wow, this is what I wanted. Or Secret Garden where the father and the son, the kid gets up and they hug. That's what I mean by young audiences are so transparent in their emotions. And grown-ups may not like your ballad, but they're probably going to just sit there and listen to it, but they won't tell you necessarily that they
Out
don't
of
like
respect, we'll just
out of respect. But I agree with you, Bob. It's like it's not any different, and you shouldn't treat it any differently. And my least favorite thing is I'm going to talk to the audience and tell them to do things and ask them their opinion and not listen to me. Like, that to me is like children's theater where you break the fourth wall. You say, where did he run? Did he run there? Did he run there? It's like, that's not drama. That is something, but that is not what I look for in an adaptation. And it's a little, in my opinion, it's a little lazy, it's a little lazy and a little manipulative. I want to teach young people how to understand theater, how to
right.
invest in theater, and how to become good critics and to want to go to theater when they grow up. And I'm not sure that's exactly like they can go to Sesame Street for that.
It's so crucial. We will have no audience if we don't start them young. That's the reason why I'm going to do one of these shows about arts and education as well. I can't believe it. I mean, it's nothing new. It's been all my life. But the first thing that gets cut in schools is arts programs, and it's making it harder and harder to develop and nurture audiences for theater. And we happen to believe in theater, so we happen to believe that's important. We also are in a country where not everybody agrees with us.
Well, that's
So,
it. I went to a conference and then the advice was you have to make sure that in your messaging you communicate that it's essential. Well, the reality is it is essential to us. We believe it's essential. We believe it's essential to creating a whole human being, right? But there are a whole bunch of people who don't consider it essential. And this is a scary time. We were lucky we got our NEA grant. We got the rest of that money from the NEA, thank
thank
goodness.
goodness, because
I
next week I've got three companies that didn't.
I am very neurotic, and I was like telling my staff, get the stuff in, and we got in under the wire. So I feel very blessed because we don't always get NEA money. We don't always get a lot of NEA money, but this past year we happened to. So yeah. Anyway, and then TYA is often like the second class citizen. And it's kind of it's really a shame because, if Disney does a general audience show like Aladdin, right? All of us, that's theater, but TYA isn't, and it's like, why? Are the budgets bigger? Is the show longer? But I guess I don't really kind of understand those kind of rules. Um, and that's why shows like Sarah Plain and Tall that's moved on, Lightning Thief that's moved on. Little Women was originally our show that wound up on Broadway.
Oh, really?
Uh,
I didn't know that.
yeah, we commissioned Alan.
Randall was one of my best friends.
Yeah. And so it was Alan Nee, and then it was Alan Nee and Allison Hubbard and Kim Older, and then it was Mindy Dickstein, who is also an alum. So, but originally it was TheaterWorks USA doing that show.
All these years, and I didn't know that. Um, and there are a couple of questions in the room. Sarah has a very long question. I'm wondering
Yeah, I
whether we
wanted
should
to
just.
let her get a chance to ask that herself, so I make sure she has everything that gets asked that she wants to.
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to bring up your question? Or
Hi,
question?
thank you for, yeah,
It's
that would be
many
great.
questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking with us, Barbara, and sharing your experience um, and knowledge of how this industry works. So I was wondering if you could speak to possible pathways to eventually get to working with TheaterWorks USA. So you said the way not to go is if you are an unknown author, don't just apply to TheaterWorks USA. What
If you're an
might be
unknown author, don't bring me a project I can't sell. If you're an unknown author, you can reach out to me and say, here's a sample of my work. I can't meet with everyone. I mean, but I'm pretty accessible. And so, and I listen to a lot of people's stuff. And then if I get a property and I have heard your stuff and I think, wow, this is a terrific person, maybe I will match you with the property. That's useful. And I guess sometimes people will, yeah, mostly it's like somebody will send me their material. And if I like it, I'll meet with them. And then I'll say, I don't know, I'll wait and see if I have something for you. The challenge is I'm not developing as much as I used to because it's expensive. So
Mhm.
if I get one new show a year, that's a lot now, maybe two. Like it's unfortunate, but it is. And I used to do a lot of review shows where I would get a whole bunch of small books because I like to hire a whole lot of writers. So I would assign each book, and it was low risk for me because really it was someone writing a 3 to 5 minute like little review song. But I haven't been able to do that either because all those books are expensive and hard to get. So I don't want to be, negative about it, but I have had people submit stuff to me and then I have hired them later. It may have taken a while, but I think I think that's really all you can do is say, here's who I am, here's how I write. Send it to me. If you have an idea for a book that you want me to get the rights to, the reality is I'm really going to have to love your work in order to go after a title because I have to spend a lot of money on that title. And also, people will often come to me with titles that I know I can't get. Like in the olden days, everyone would come to me with a Sendak or a Seuss title, or a Silverstein, Shel Silverstein. I'd be like, if I could have gotten those titles, I would have gotten those titles. Or they'll look at like, here's the top 5 books on the bestseller list for kids, and I can tell they're not even books these people really like. So when I meet with you, let's say you send me material, I like your material, I meet with you, and I'll ask you, what are you interested in? What kind of material speaks to you? What do you love to read? So that I can get a sense of who you are. So that if I'm looking for somebody to write that kind of thing, I'll maybe think of you, if that makes sense. So I don't
Okay.
know. Is that
Yes,
a
yes.
good
That
answer?
does
Okay.
that does make sense. I'm wondering if I could ask a few follow-up questions.
Sure.
I say yes.
Okay, okay. Um, so it sounds like one possible pathway to working with TheaterWorks USA
Hmm.
is to submit written material to TheaterWorks
Hmm.
USA. So I'm wondering if another way could be write the material. So I don't live in New York.
Hmm.
So I also feel like I'm not kind of part of
Yeah.
maybe as familiar with that area.
Right.
But I am a theater practitioner and
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with certain practices. Could
Sure.
I write something,
Yeah.
then self-produce it, or maybe instead of self-produce, say collaborate or produce with a small group,
Sure.
then like have a production, then take that same production, do it with a small established company that's not a company that I start.
Yeah.
And after that, collaborate with a large company. Would that also be a pathway? Or I
I
guess
suppose.
the
I mean,
writing
again,
part, and I'm also, I
maybe.
guess I should say, like my artistic practice started as an actor and a singer. I've
Hmm.
also done directing work and teaching artist work for youth,
Yep.
and some producing work. But I think the writing, and I've also do playwriting work, but I've done playwriting work because
Yeah.
we wanted the material out there, not because that's my primary artistic identity.
Gotcha.
So that writing piece, kind of like when theater is 3D,
Hmm.
when you're doing the actual theater work, and then like how it is on the written page, and you're dealing with intellectual property,
Hmm.
or if you devised it with a small group, perhaps intellectual property that's owned by 3 or 4 people. Um, I think I'm getting a little off track here,
I
but
think you're in the
um,
weeds. You're deeply in the weeds.
I'm trying to figure out what your question is, but
I guess my
I would
question is,
say alternative
what
ways of
are
getting your work produced is
pathways?
always a good idea. Self-producing is not a bad idea.
Okay.
And then there's no guarantee. Like I don't know, like again, we're talking theoretical at this point. But I do license titles and produce them. So there are not a lot of them, but I do license things that I have not developed myself if I think I can sell them. Because if I can't sell them, I can't put them in my theater season because I don't have a theater. Somebody has to buy a title. They just have to. That is the bane of my existence. It's not that I do these shows because I only love to do a Pete the Cat or whatever title I have. It's because I don't have a theater to program. So I can't build up my audience, right? And schools only have so much money, and presenters are always looking to sell tickets. So I would be lying if I said, here's this no-name show that somebody did out of town that did really well and it got good reviews, and now I can tour it to teachers and students. I probably still couldn't
Mhm.
because I have to sell it to so many people in order to afford to produce it. If that makes sense. It's like,
It does, and thank you for taking the time to actually really like explain those specific pieces.
sure.
We're
And
gonna
that
we're
the
gonna move to
thank you.
Paul Kirby, and then I'm gonna go to Greg Nick Rasavas. I Greg, forgive me. I tried to pronounce your name. I hope I got it close. But Paul, you have your hand raised.
Hey, yeah,
Let's.
thanks. Thanks so much for this. I have, I'm a composer and occasional lyricist, and I have a complete production, which could be either full length, 3 act, or 45 minutes
Mhm.
of The Little Princess from Frances Hodgson Burnett. Is there a market for that anywhere in
I
any
don't
of those?
know. TheaterWorks did one of those a million years ago. It's like an old title.
I
I
write good songs.
I believe it. I could not produce it, but that doesn't mean somebody else couldn't. Like again, there's a lot of TYA theaters all across the country. So, and a lot of them would do it maybe as like a holiday show because Little Princess feels like a holiday show. And so I would say you should reach out to that TYA community.
Is
And
there a list somewhere?
there's an organization called TYA USA.
Okay.
I would probably start there. And again, AI is ChatGPT is a brilliant thing. If you haven't used it, you go on and you say, I would like a list of all of the TYA companies in these states, and it will pull them up. It's crazy. So if you haven't tried it, it's an addictive research tool.
And
And then
Great.
you can dig deeper. Who's the artistic director? Who's the literary manager? And it will give you that. And should, like again, the way you would query a magazine, right? You should look at their seasons. You should
Yeah,
see
yeah.
what they're producing. I mean, I don't have to tell you that
I
clearly.
did something similar with opera companies for an opera I had composed. So yeah, that's great. Thanks so much.
Sure.
actually, I want to take one of Sarah's other questions about Let It Be. Is Let It Be a ballad? It's a driving song. If it's a ballad, it would be a power ballad at least. But it's got a lot going on in it. A ballad is more like If I Loved You, love
Yes, it's
songs.
self-reflective. We take a moment and we muse about something. To me, that's the kind of ballad that doesn't work. Where Let It Go is, I don't consider that a ballad. It's really active, it's dramatic, it's a character stating something strongly and emotionally. That's fine. And it's not slow.
Yeah, we're suggesting that a more introspective song is nothing that a kid is going to really want to sit through. Something introspective and working out inner problems. And there is an argument that can say that Let It Go is part of that as well. But it's so active. It is such an active song.
It is very active. And look, with a ballad, if you make it really, really short, like again, if you surround it with something dramatic, if you make it really short, maybe you can get away with it. I did something with I did something about King Tut, and there was a really, really beautiful song called Golden Bird, and it was definitely a ballad. And Gordon Greenberg was directing it, and the writer said, "Please save our ballad." And so he had like this dead body where somebody, like two people with a stretcher, came on and put the dead body and lifted it up, and like there was so much activity going on stage that the kids didn't wiggle. But were they really listening to that song? I don't know. I don't know.
I know we're having our musical workshop on Sunday, and it's the conflict and obstacles part 2 of the 3-part workshop. And one of the pieces that was submitted is a TYA piece. It's a Jack and the Beanstalk musical.
Right.
And I noticed that a lot of the music in that, and I'll be saying this on Sunday at the workshop, a lot of it doesn't drive the action. And I noticed that the director staged it because we have a video of the performance. It's directed. The directors put all sorts of action happening around the song. So that's how you get a ballad into a show like this. Have other things. Have your director make something active happening on the stage that the kids can be engaged in. Um,
Which doesn't mean that it's the right thing because they're not listening to the song. So if you actually want them to listen, the other thing I'll say is if for composers, if they start clapping through the entire song, and sometimes writers will go, well, that's great. They're really into the music, but what that really means is they actually don't care. And they're not listening to the words and they're amusing themselves. So watch out for that.
Good to know. Good to know. Greg, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. So my question was basically, I kind of find that your organization is similar to New 42, except your company is more about licensing, development, and touring, whereas New 42 is more like in-house. Like they will bring in theater companies and they will do shows in New York, coincidentally right next to where Aladdin is playing. So I
Sure.
so I guess that was my question is like what are the differences between your company and I guess other companies like New 42 and yours?
The new 42 is what you call a presenting house. So they present, they book and they present, they don't develop. So we played New 42. We did Pout Pout Fish at New 42. We did Cheryl's show, Color of Justice. We opened 47 the New Victory, right? And we did another one. We did Just So Stories. But they present, and we don't present because we're not a theater. We develop. So we develop new musicals, and that is really a big part of our mission. We license very rarely. I think because Jay, from the inception of the company, it was new work, primarily musicals, emerging artists, and I think that's really what makes us different than the new Victory. Um, yeah, like they can book us in, but at this point they don't develop new work. And they also bring in a lot of diverse type of entertainment. So they'll bring in jugglers and circus things and a lot of things from foreign countries. And again, that's a presenting house. So if that makes sense.
No, it does. It definitely does.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wish we could do that. I wish I could just book things in and spend money. Like just, I can't.
Okay, I'm looking. Sarah's wondering about when I grow up from Matilda, whether that's an introspective ballad.
I don't know it that well.
I don't know it well enough either to answer.
Sorry.
Um,
I'm a few bars.
Sarah, sing it for us. She's a singer. She did a terrific audition for us. Um,
Do you actually want me to sing it or are you joking? I think we're near
Um,
5:30. You're joking, yes?
yeah, I'm
You're
joking.
joking. Okay.
Unless you
I could
really
sing it
want
for you
to.
another time. It is beautiful and the lyrics are amazing. Yeah.
well,
And I
Matilda is also not necessarily geared for TYA. Matilda
know.
is not. Matilda's a show about kids, but it's not a show that was written for kids. And also the family musical. It would fit under that definition, but there's something different about Matilda. I think it's much more grown up, and I do think kids can enjoy it though. You can take kids to that. You can take kids to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah, I saw some kids running out screaming at Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, some young kids, and also Matilda. So you just have to watch out. But, having said even the ballad thing, so when we did Sarah Plain and Tall, there was a very short thing that Larry and Elle wrote called Please Don't Miss the Sea. And it was very, very short and very beautiful, and then reprised at the end. It was short enough to keep the kids' interest. There were kid characters who were they wanted something. Again, it wasn't just reflective, it was active. And also, Joe Calarco had something going on stage that supported it, um, which was dramatic. Not just useless movement, but he made sure that the kids understood that there was high drama in the moment and they invested in it and they were quiet. But it was very short. So again, there's no hard and fast rules, but you will notice that if you start off with like four slow notes at the beginning of your song, in an intro, every kid in the audience will wiggle around. So, and then you have to win them back. So good luck.
Well, things to be aware of, things to think about.
Yep.
Susan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about the running times of your shows. But first, I'll say I actually wrote a song for a TheaterWorks production that did not get used, but it
Okay.
was their show on divorce, and I was so crushed that they did not pick it. But apparently, from what
You're talking to Barbara.
I wasn't there then. That was the year I got hired because I had to watch when the cookie crumbles at the promenade. So I did not pick your song.
Okay,
Oh, good.
it was Jay Harnick who did not
Okay.
who did pick my song.
Yes.
But in the fullness of time, it may have been too realistic, as I learned later about the show. Um, but I'm curious about the running times of your shows because what I remember from middle school and well, middle school in particular, when I was in middle school, which is a long time ago, we did 35-minute versions of Pirates of Penzance and things like that. Um, and so I also did my own 35-minute version of Mary Poppins when I wrote it in ninth grade, and we did it. And I didn't want to sing. I was Mary. I didn't want to sing, so I did not give myself any songs. But there was something about 35 minutes. So I'm wondering what the running time of your shows are.
Barbara
Yeah.
said
And
earlier 50
35 minutes
minutes.
is way too short.
You
I
said
mean,
50.
well, an hour is what most of the shows are. And
Mhm,
the reason they're an hour is because it fits in a school period, kind of.
mhm.
For the younger ones now, and this didn't used to be, as I said, they're usually a little shorter. They're like 50, 52, 55. And then we have something like Dogman, which is a full 2-act show with an intermission. So I would say it's like 75,
Mhm.
80 minutes with a 15 or 20-minute intermission. Um, and we've done, so yeah, that's kind of runs the gamut of what we do. We could never sell something for
Mhm.
35 minutes. That
Okay.
was too short.
Okay. Was there anything else, Susan? No?
Yeah, that I have an idea for a particular book I loved when I was in middle school, and then when I read it to one of my sons, he loved it also. Won't give the title now, but it would need the rights procured. And I reached out to the publishers some time ago, never heard back. So is that because who am I? But that you would have more, if
Often
I
they don't.
presented it to you as
If you presented it to me and I thought it was worth trying to get the rights, I could try. Sometimes they don't get back to you because they have a deal in place. Sometimes they're swamped and publishers, are lean staffed too. And then there are publishers where I actually, and sometimes it's not even the publisher. It's like the rights really are held by the literary agent or the writer. So the whole first thing is figuring out who really has the rights. Um,
right.
yeah,
And
and
this is
it takes a while.
out of print. This is
Oh,
long
oh,
print,
So, yeah, I'm
but
sorry, what?
it's long out of print, but
Long out of print. Okay.
in many ways, it's a currently relevant story.
yeah. If it's long out of print, it's probably not something I can sell. Like again, I, I unfortunately need the mega brands to
Mhm.
really keep them, yeah, keep the doors open with those brands. So, um, I'm surprised you can't get the rights, although like again, if it's out of print, maybe you should try to reach out. Is the person who wrote it or their estate, is the person dead who wrote it?
I think she was still alive when I first reached out, but that was at least 10 years ago.
I mean, there might be an estate. I would say research is always the best thing.
Mhm.
It sounds like it shouldn't be that hard to get the rights to something that's out of print.
But
Well, I do.
it's still a lot of work, Susan, and it helps sometimes when you have an attorney. Although I know people who've actually reached out personally as a writer to other people for the rights, and they liked the fact that they weren't going through an attorney or through an agent. They liked meeting somebody who wanted to do the show. It can happen. Doesn't happen all the time, but it can
But
happen.
it can happen, especially in a situation like that where it isn't a mega brand. And maybe if you can find the estate or the author, they would be honored that you reached out and wanted to adapt it.
Hmm.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to wrap up now because it's time to have dinner.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you, Barbara. I know I've been persisting in getting you, and I really wanted you to be on the show, and I really wanted to learn more about what you do, and but also because I like you, I just wanted to have you on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank everybody who attended. Thank you to the community. I also want to thank everybody out there who stumbles upon us and watches this. If you find it interesting, if you actually like talking about theater and or like listening to people talk about theater, if you want to be part of the conversation and ask questions, I can make that happen. Just email me. Email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. I'll put you on our Zoom list and I'll invite you every week. Next week is a crucial conversation. Please, I hope people will come to this. We're going to talk about the defunding of the NEA, and I have 3 companies coming that have lost some funding, and I also have somebody coming from the Americans for the Arts. It's an important conversation. Please join us for that. In the weeks to come, I have all sorts of interesting people coming. I've got a playwright who's transitioned into film. He's going to talk about the difference between writing for film and writing for theater. I've got a collective of women's groups that got together and were producing together in January. They were called the Femme Collective. It's multi-stages, the Neopolitical Cowgirls, and Eden Theater Company. They're going to be on the show. Bob Cuccioli is coming on. Just fun to meet Bob and hear what he's up to and what he thinks about what's going on in the world right now. So so many other things too. Keep joining us, please, guys. I do this gladly, and I do this willingly. And we also let you come for free if you can't pay. But I also want to say that now that we're back to live, and now that we're out of shutdown, I got a lot of bills. TRU has a lot of bills. So if you want to give us a donation, that would be helpful. And if you want to actually pay $10 or something more to join us, I'd be very grateful. Or if you want to join as a member, that would be fabulous. But if you want to give us a donation, just to say thank you, go to TRUDonate, TRUDonate.com, TRUDonate.com, and give what you can. Well, that's it. And I hope you'll all come back, and I hope to see you again next week and in the weeks to come.